Welcome to Rauta and Death Metal Review. Let's put it this way, before we start talking about the actual release over here. We could say death metal can be categorized in so many ways, but there are basically three different ways to say it. First of all, we have the kind of a death metal, which is kind of a brutal, kind of a heavy, more extreme than your average heavy metal band, but it's not really death metal. We're talking about kind of a melodic death metal and so-called death metal, deathcore and all that stuff. Let's put that aside. Then we have the real death metal. It sounds heavy, brutal, violent, aggressive, kind of stuff that makes you feel, yeah, I'm listening to something really extreme here. Like, hey, these are our bodies all over. These guys growl and they are not human beings. And then there is this extreme death metal style, which just leaves you without, speechless. Things or bands or artists that go way beyond. Be it technical, be it brutality, be it speed, be it just some weird stuff. Too much for you to handle. Extreme death metal. Now, this is one of those bands. Beneath the Massacre, and now here with an album called Fearmonger. Fearmonger is here with this nice looking digipack release. Not glossy cover, but more like this kind of a cardboard feeling with the matte kind of a feeling. Feels nice, looks nice, kind of a omnibus, if you will. These guys are from Canada, and one could say this is the type of technicality, brutality, fierceless stuff. Rather fierce. You know what I'm talking about. Losing my mind here because this album is so goddamn brutal, chaotic, violent, aggressive, and beyond any human understanding. Well, almost to say the least. Now, if we're gonna talk about Beneath the Massacre style and compare it to other bands, we would at least go to the bands such as, I don't know, maybe Cryptopsy, but even more so the bands such as Origin and Archspire. You know, the bands that kind of have at least 4-armed drummer, guitarist with, I don't know, 12 fingers, I guess, and vocalist which are, well, or at least is the certain kind of a inhuman growling. Well, let's not go that far, but you get the idea. This is the stuff that even your regular Cannibal Corpse fan won't touch because it's just too crazy, too violent, too technical, too messy. Before I get to do this particular release here, I was actually but rather reading my colleagues' comments on the previous albums, which I haven't heard, to kind of figure out what my colleagues were thinking. And it became clear to me that even those people are all death metal heads. Reading at least 4 different reviewers going about the previous releases, some were like, yeah, this is great, this is technical, this is brutal, and this is just great. And some were like, snore fest, snooze fest, like, wake me up, this is just way too chaotic, way too messy, and comments beyond these two extremities. Now, while I just happen to be a fan of technical death metal as well as the more kind of a traditional type, I kind of understand both ends. It's not easy to create this kind of extreme, technical, brutal death metal and making it interesting. Not for everybody. This is very, very much a marginal type of music, and as such, it's kind of easy to understand why it doesn't go for everybody in the death metal scene. Anyway, we all know that most bands from Quebec, Canada, in the extreme metal field are black metal ones. At least most ones that seem to operate in the underground bubble and all that stuff. Well, I guess we could say safely that Beneath the Massacre is not one of those extreme metal bands operating in the underground. After all, it's signed to Century Media Records. And at the same time, it's kind of hard to see this band being mainstream audience like ever. It's way too complicated, way too brutal, way too fast, way too extreme to be that. So it's kind of interesting that they landed with Century Media. After all, this is very, very marginal in style. Yet at the same time, it's doing well what it's doing. Now, this band Fearmonger, a band, artist, label, title, release, Fearmonger, is the 4th album in question, and I don't know what to say except that it is really marginal style going for a particular, audience who is just ready to embrace this kind of weirdness. And by weirdness, I mean all the previous adjectives from speed to technicality to brutality to heavy pounding production and those good growly vocals. Now, because the album is almost all the way, very, very fast in tempo and it's not really giving you a place to breathe, it can be very, very exhausting experience. At the same time, if you are into kind of a musical pornography, that is, having those details with drums and cymbals and guitar and bass work and all that stuff, you might find this album really, really fascinating. Me, on the other hand, because like I said, I like both traditional death metal, I like both the, very extreme and technical sorts and, basically everything in between as long as the music is good. I find a little bit divided between these releases. I mean, Origin from United States, being the same genre, roughly, more or less, is one of my favorite death metal bands. And I like bands as Nile, I like Archspire, and I like those bands that go technical and go deep and kind of weird with their music. But obviously you need to have those good riffs. You need to have the kind of a songwriting to kind of justify it all. And I think Fearmonger is a little bit messy in that respect. It's very, very chaotic. And while those guys can really handle their instruments super well, there's still something missing. For the lack of better word, I could say it's the kind of a magic layer which makes separate good albums from the great and great from the actual bullseye superior albums. This is having just a thin layer of that magic. So while the guys create enormously wonderful and interesting release with this technical and brutal playing, there's something that I find lacking here. And while it's not much, I mean, this is actually quite enjoyable album in the terms of technical and brutal death metal, there's still something that I kind of feel this band could have, but I just can't get my finger on it, except for the lazy comment to say, yeah, it could be better songwriting. Now, I know this is for very, very marginal audience, and those who already know the band probably already have it, because after all, this was released more than 6 months ago, but the corona kind of got this physical copy delayed. But in case you're one of those, fans of technical and brutal death metal, and you missed this album, now, click, go to check it out quickly as fast as you can, because this is something that you should probably know already. So definitely an interesting release, but only for a marginal audience. And me, a little bit divided between good and just quite okay. Definitely worth checking out and worth finding out if this is your cup of tea or not. Interesting, fascinating, cating, and blowing my mind. Blowing. Yeah, it is. See ya, and bye-bye.